go on? Okay. So, Reverend McDowell, do you mind saying a little word of prayer
Yes.
before we start, please?
On this special day of the year, as we move about and have our being, the significant day today is a love day. 2 Corinthians 5, 1 through 8 sort of symbolizes that whole love position, that principle of love. We pray for this city of ours as we embrace the issues, as we posture ourselves undergirded by the principle of love. Touch us collectively and yet individually. Let us feel and sense the love of Him who is able to do all things. In Him we pray. Amen.
At this time, the city council discussion items begin with item 1, the Climate Protection Action Committee update. Mr. Bob Petrulius, the chair of CPAC.
Well, good afternoon, and happy Valentine's Day. Hope everybody's planning a good one this evening. And thank you for inviting us to update you on what CPAC has been up to. Today, I want to give you a quick update in 3 main parts. The first is just to let you know who we are and what we do. The second is to give you some background on a council resolution that we hope you will be considering soon. And the third is just to talk about some of the significant funding that is becoming available through the Inflation Reduction Act. Let's see. Yes, thank you. Boy, somebody's reading my mind. It's great. I like that. Currently, CPAC has 7 voting positions, 3 of which are not filled at this moment. The 4 of us who are voting members of the committee include Gretchen Lambert, who's here. She's the vice president of an architecture firm, Studio 2LR, and is also a board member of the Columbia Empowerment Zone. Dr. Lori Zilkowski was not able to be here today. She is a climate scientist at the University of South Carolina and is also a member of the Clean Energy Procurement Cohort, which you may be hearing more about later. Tamara Warren is currently the sustainability officer at the Samsung facility at Newberry, in Newberry, and she's also active in a number of environmentally focused organizations. And I am the chair. I'm an independent program evaluation consultant, work mostly with education-related programs, and also a member of the South Carolina Sierra Club Executive Committee and active in the Climate Reality Project's local group. There are 8 appointed non-voting members, and they represent a range of organizations and concerns. So just to let you have an idea of kind of who you're talking to here. The main purposes for CPAC are to inform the city, including the council and city departments, about climate-related issues, do some public outreach, a little bit of public education, and build partnerships with the city and interested organizations. Our current projects are addressing climate impacts on low and moderate income residents and the transition to clean energy, and we'll be talking a little bit more about some of those things later on. The next slide is just a quick look at CPAC's current homepage, and Mary Pat Baldoff is the person who kind of shepherds our web presence. So let me talk to you a little bit about CPAC's background and the resolution that we've been working on for the last year. 17 years ago, the then mayor signed the U.S. Conference of Mayors Climate Protection Agreement. That committed the city to,
I think that must be a typo. He wasn't mayor until 2010.
oh, so that would have been Coble then, rather than Benjamin.
No, Mayor Benjamin signed it, and it was, I think it was in 16, I think. I have to go back and
No,
look.
it was earlier than that, because it was,
I know it wasn't in 206.
okay. Well, you
But
have.
now we need to find the answer.
Yeah, my notes said 2006, but I wasn't here at the time, so I guess I have to claim a little bit of ignorance.
Then what?
Right, yes,
Okay.
this was the Conference of Mayors pledge, not the Ready for 100 pledge.
Wouldn't be
Um,
here.
So, in any case, whenever it was
Mayor
signed,
Coble.
it was.
You need to know that.
I do need to know that, yeah. Whenever it was signed, it committed the city to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions. And about a year later, CPAC was established in part to work on this particular issue. Now, let's go to, I think we're good. 6 years ago, the council adopted the Ready for 100 resolution, which had been advocated by the Sierra Club and some other organizations. It's a national effort, and several cities signed on to it, including Columbia. It established the goal of transitioning to 100% clean and renewable energy by 2036. So I think it's clear to me anyway that it was a great first step in preparing the city to meet the challenges of climate change. However, there were a few things that it lacked. One was there are no progress benchmarks in the original proposal or in the original resolution. And there are no implementation plans. So those are, if we want to move forward, those are kind of significant issues that need to be addressed. So in the last year or so, CPAC members and city staff and other interested folks got together to develop the new resolution, which we hope will fill those gaps without tying the city's hands too much. So we've been calling it Resolution 2.0, and it's got a longer title than that, but for our purposes, it's handy to be able to call it that short name. So it does three main things. First of all, it establishes progress benchmarks. It creates a roadmap for the transition of city properties and operations, and we maintain that it will also save money and improve capacity of the city. And finally, it sets a goal of 75 megawatts of new solar to meet the city's projected operational needs by 2036.
So one of the things I think we've got to talk about too is building a plan that we can step to achieve. Solar is just one piece of it, and the intermittence and the cost of batteries today. We need to make sure that we're looking at, we want to reconstitute the hydro plant, which could get us somewhere between 5 to 10 megawatts, depending on how hard we run it. But also looking at alternatives, anaerobic digestion and others. I'm on the Climate Mayors Committee. I'm also on the Energy Committee at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We're having a lot of discussions about trying to get projects that realistically can protect us and get us there, where we have to have a combination. Can't just be all solar. We can't go to all electric vehicles and based on talking to some of the mayors who had lived through a natural disaster, they couldn't charge their vehicles. They couldn't charge their bucket trucks. They couldn't, the equipment they needed that when they'd advance. So how do we create a balance? I know that they're saying now that CNG is carbon negative, not carbon neutral. I don't know if you've heard that. I still think it's neutral, but somebody else said today. So, but how do we build a plan where we can put all those pieces in? Because the one thing we want to be able to do is not only get as close as we can to that goal, but not put our city at risk either. And I think a prime example is we learned during the holidays when we had that really cold weather during Christmas. You know, out of all the 1,100 megawatts of solar that was out there, none of it was usable at the time it was needed by the power company. So we got to figure out how do we create those safety nets and those to help with that, to protect that as we make those investments. So I think we'd like to move faster. Now, I will tell you that we hope to get some solar out at our wastewater treatment plant here sooner than later. And we did have the discussion with Dominion about moving that up in their list as part of, as we're renegotiating our franchise agreement. And one of the things we talked about is what they could do to help us achieve some of these goals. So I think timing's perfect for 2.0.
Absolutely, thank you for that. And I hope that what we've been able to do with the language in 2.0 is to leave enough flexibility for the city to be able to take advantage of improving technology and new ideas. You know, I'm sure, like, we know the wastewater treatment plant generates a certain amount of biogas that could be used for all sorts of things. So it's currently being used to run some of the boilers and things in the plant, but there's excess that's just being flared off at the moment. So that might be able to be used for powering
Redirecting that
vehicles or-
250 CFM, absolutely, and maybe creating other opportunities where we could take advantage of food waste. Today, with the DAF waste, all the chicken farming that goes around us, all that material through the process has energy value. And if we harvest that and redirect the water and use that gray water for irrigation instead of just getting rid of it, I think there are a lot of things that we can do that aren't new ideas, but will work great in conjunction with a lot of these others. And we've been in some in-depth conversations with some other communities about what they've done and lessons they've learned. So I'm hoping that we can continue to move forward.
Well, I know that CPAC would love to have more conversations with you, particularly since you've been looking at these issues pretty carefully, and just hear more of your ideas and thoughts about it. And yes, I mean, I think we need to keep our eyes on the goal rather than on necessarily the specific methods to get there.
Absolutely.
You know, so that we're being practical as well as moving forward.
And we're in a position now to be able to apply for funding that we haven't had in the past, that if we leverage the correct way, we really can really see some improvement. We're seeing some other cities that have worked with HUD and in conjunction with HUD funding and other to bring in when they're starting to build affordable housing and attainable housing, that all of that housing already has solar built in. And in some places, not really for the energy, but for hot water usage and other things for heat. And so I think, you know, using those creative methods to maybe bring those two funding sources together, we need probably 16,000 units of housing over the next decade. So it's a great place for us to focus as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I've actually come to sort of the end of the introduction about the resolution. So if there are other questions or comments about it, I'd be real interested to hear what you have to say.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for this wonderful information, Dr. Petroulis. Other municipalities in the state, are there any organizations like CPAC, Greenville, Charleston, North Charleston?
There are, I haven't been in direct contact with them, but there are advisory groups that work with the cities and the rest of the state.
Right, so comparing notes to see if their initiatives are on par with what we're trying to do, possibly for a stronger voice at the State House, right? Because we all know the State House could use some good lobbying from groups like you to consult with us. So anything you can do to compare notes with the surrounding municipalities, the stronger voice, the better.
Thank you, yes, that's actually a great idea. We did participate in the Climate Ready Columbia Conference last April that brought together people from all over the region. But we didn't have a direct, or we didn't have a forum for the different cities to
Well, it
get
sounds like
together and talk, so.
you're pretty well organized, so you're ahead of the game. So even counties, cities, that stronger voice would go a long way. So
Yeah.
please lead on that.
Yeah, and certainly climate issues are regional as well as
Absolutely.
municipal, and
Yeah,
so being able to find people to work with would be great.
and go get all the donut holes in the city as well. That might help, right?
All right, yeah.
Did
Anything
you
else?
bring a
Yes.
copy of the resolution today?
I believe, Mayor Pat, is that, I guess it wasn't in the packet, or was it?
I
Oh, it
hope
is.
it is.
Oh, my apologies.
Yes, sir.
It was in the, online, okay.
Talk to me some more about that point two, bullet two, roadmap for city properties.
Let's see. The fifth slide? No.
Page five under
Resolution 2.0 looks specifically at city operations as opposed to the wider community. So what we're interested in is really reducing or eliminating greenhouse gas emissions from city operations, which would include buildings, other fixed assets, vehicles, that sort of thing. So in a lot of cases now, for example, we have boilers that are powered by, that are fueled by natural gas. Eventually, those really are going to need to be replaced with probably heat pumps or other forms of electrified systems so that they're not burning fossil fuels. So it's that kind of stuff. What we really envision is for Public Works and other city departments to take a systematic approach to looking at all these different assets of the city and establishing a way of moving forward that makes financial sense as well as making sense for the climate. So, for example, as new buildings are being built, we want to build them to the highest standards. Buying new equipment of different kinds, we want to make sure that they're as energy efficient as possible, things of that sort. So what we envision is to have to bring in kind of energy audits as in a phased way. Yeah. To to begin to make those changes, and then to do it in a way that makes sense financially and in other ways. So, yeah. Anything else? Well, the last thing that I'd like to talk to you about is the resources that are becoming available through the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. These things are already becoming available, and so we need to get on it in order to be able to really get the resources that we need. So wanted to tell you a little bit about what CPAC's been doing for the last couple of years on preparing for that eventuality. We are currently a CLEAP city, a Communities Local Energy Action Program city, and what that involves is getting U.S. Department of Education, or sorry, I work for education stuff, U.S. Department of Energy technical assistance to help us really think about how to implement some of the things that we need to do. In particular, for CLEAP, we're looking at helping low and moderate income people retrofit their houses, improve energy efficiency, those kinds of things. Of course, as we know, over 50% of the households in Columbia are rental. So that makes it a little more complicated because the people who inhabit the houses don't have control a lot of times over, improving insulation or making those kinds of improvements. So, so that's one of the nuts we're trying to crack with CLEAP. In addition, last summer, Dr. Kirsten Dow, along with CPAC and the Columbia Tree and Appearance Commission, undertook a heat study in which we mapped the city's heat islands. So we now have a much better idea of where there are places in the city where people may be subject to increasing amounts of heat. And as we know, as the climate, as general temperatures increase, we're going to see many, many more days exceeding 95 degrees over the summers. So, if it was 3 weeks a few years ago, we're looking at maybe 3 months within the next 5 or 10 years. So we really need to be ready to mitigate some of those high heat problems. And one of the ways to do that is to think about tree cover, things like that. Also maybe making more cooling stations available, those kinds of things. But we need to know what the problem is before we can really start to address it. But that heat mapping study is now complete and has been released. So we're able to now start responding to it. And finally, 2 years ago, with a grant from the Sierra Club, we were able to commission a report on the clean energy transition for the city of Columbia, done by Anthony Artuso. And that report has been shared with city departments and others. And we think that it helps us, it gives us some ideas about methods for approaching this problem. So those are some resources that we have available to help us sort of justify requests for IRA funding. And some of that funding really belongs here in Columbia, hopefully a lot of it. So I've given you a little handout that has a list of many of the major programs under the IRA. And some of those programs you'll see are ones that probably can match the needs of the city and help us really justify these kinds of requests.
The big piece in there that's not shown here really is the fact that municipalities now and authorities can take advantage of the ITC, the investment tax credit, and the production tax credit, which on a solar project's 24%. It's a massive amount of money where we weren't able to participate before, which kept a lot of municipalities from being able to do their own projects and having to wait on somebody else and bring in multiple partners. And that way we can actually do more. And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to figure out is how do we leverage that, that component too, because that's a big piece, especially when you start talking about 25, 50, and 75 megawatts worth of power from solar.
Yes. Absolutely. Ms.
Herbert?
So with the IRA funding, how long will this be available?
Well,
Well, and I guess, let me tell you why I'm asking, because I think we need to have some type of strategy so that we can know what we want to go after. And I'm just trying to figure out, timeline-wise, do we have time to kind of put together a strategy so that we know what we want to go after?
well, I think we have some time. Some of this money is already in the pipeline, so the faster we can get ready to request it, the better. The funding for the IRA is what, 5 years, I think? So there's some time in order to implement these plans, but if we can get the requests in quickly, that will help us to maximize the amounts that we have available for that. So I don't know, that's a pretty vague answer, but I think
It's going to take some time for them to get it out. And part of why we hire those third-party consultants is to help us go after this type of funding. But it's going to take them a little bit to get it back out to us too. So hopefully we'll continue to apply for everything that we can to take advantage. And some of it we may or may not get, but others we're going to go after for sure.
So CPAC issues are a part of what the group is going to be working on.
All of these are part of the ongoing discussion that's been going on with CPAC and frankly, most communities for a long time. They just didn't have the funding available that is available now, and I think that's the big difference. So we kind of knew what we needed to go after. Now we have a place to go after it.
Okay. And just for clarity, I was talking about the consultants. This is one of the areas that they're going to be working in.
Everything that's under a rock, we're going to find.
Okay.
I want to do a follow-up question with this heat index. Oh, I'm sorry. Back during the summer, I think, there was some work done, I read it somewhere, where that was a heat indexing.
Right.
Now, is that one in the same as we look at what was done this summer as opposed to what CPAP is thinking about doing, or is it one in the same?
I think what you're talking about is the heat mapping
That's
project
correct.
that was done. And that was actually based on a grant to one of the scientists at USC. But they brought us and the Tree and Appearance Commission into the process. And actually, I rode around in a car and, with the sensors and all that business. It was kind of fun. But yeah, those are the same project. And essentially what we're trying to do is to figure out where the hot spots are and where the places that need the most attention.
Mr. Mayor. Bob, on the heat mapping that my colleague was talking about, I think we missed a golden opportunity last summer when you did that project, but I'm sure it's going to be able to be repeated this summer to show the difference in the temperature on Main Street with all of the trees going down Main Street and on Sumter Street where there are no trees and on Assembly Street where there are minimum amount of trees. So I hope that when the heat comes back around in July, you might do a
Little
special
follow-up study, huh?
PR program to
Okay.
get some publicity on what trees and shade can do for the temperature.
That's a great idea. And
The other thing is, I don't think the council has ever gotten that Artuso Clean Energy Transition Report. And if y'all would make sure that we would get it forwarded to us, we might be able to push some of these department heads to clean up their act.
all right, absolutely. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I would just note that the IRA goes until 2033, so we have time. Yeah, the tax credits have to be used by 2033. A lot of time.
Still,
Yeah.
When the city gave itself 20 years to transition to 100% clean and renewable energy, 20 years seemed like a long time. And man, we're down to like 14 years now, right? So time's a wasting. So I think even though it just, it seems like we've got a lot of time to deal with some of this stuff, we really need to get the wheels in motion as quickly as possible.
And that was actually my next question. And I know you and I have had some conversations about the achievable goals, and there was at one point where we were potentially not going to meet that 2036 goal. With the Framework 2.0 or the Resolution 2.0, do you feel confident that that would be something that we could show as progress?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Clint may have other perspectives on it, but yeah.
I'll just share one comment. Thank you, Bob. So Resolution 2.0 is really about city operations and our energy footprint. The Ready for 100 pledge is about every citizen in Columbia. So I do think that what Bob is laying out and what I think y'all need to study when this Resolution 2.0 does kind of lay out a pathway to get to the city's own operations. I think there's another resolution coming that will address
They're ready for
the
it.
citizen portion of it. So I'm sorry, Bob.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yes, we do envision following this up with a wider ranging community-wide resolution. But for now, we wanted to focus on the city to try and get that ball rolling, and then think bigger after that. So moving forward, like it says on the slides, we stand ready to provide whatever assistance we can to the city council and to the city to meet these goals. And we hope to be able to continue the conversations and really kind of pushing us to move forward. So anything else? Thank you for your.
Anybody have any other questions, comments, suggestions?
I think one of the things we've talked about, just kind of food for thought, on one of our committee meetings is an interest to look at how we can reduce litter in our city. And there have been some very preliminary conversations around, working with the state to potentially increase fines around littering. So would be interested to talk with you all about that environmental perspective and impact of looking at some of those pieces as well.
That would be really interesting, and there might be some things that shade into things like fossil fuel use and things like that. For example, if we could encourage restaurants that do takeout to use biodegradable or compostable clamshells, things of that sort, there may be ways that we could do that would also be beneficial to the businesses, which is what we want to see, those kind of synergies. So, yeah.
Mayor, I did
Yes.
have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm trying to learn some of our new committee structures. I was trying to see if maybe this would be appropriate for our infrastructure.
I think it would be health, environment, and social affairs.
It probably goes through, it could go in either one.
Yeah.
Depending on what the
Whichever one
issue, depending on what the issue is, because some of it's infrastructure, some of it's policy, some of it's really a mix when you look at that, because, we got to get grid ready. We're not grid ready yet. We could not handle all the chargers and everything that, if you tried to go fleet. So you got
sorry.
infrastructure needs, and then you've got, in the resolution going through
That's
it,
what I
there's a
was
lot
talking
of
about.
policy stuff, so that probably go under the general health and wellness.
And that's what I was speaking of, the
The 2.0.
resolution for the appropriate committee. I won't say which one that is, to go through it and bring it back to full council. Any heartache with that?
I like the health because Clint is the staff liaison for that one, and I think it can go to that one.
And so there's a
Keep it
recommendation that the
consistent with
2.0 go to,
And we have a
Health and
meeting
Wellness
next week,
Committee.
so we could put that on with some of the other items too. Or 2 weeks from now, we have a meeting.
We'll have to make that referral later.
Yeah, you'll have to make that next week.
Yeah.
formally.
And of course, we'll be happy to talk to whoever wants to consider this.
What is the name of the committee? Okay. You want me to say that? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next discussion item is the amendment concerning the 1998 Code of Ordinances of the City of Columbia, South Carolina, Chapter 5, Buildings and Building Regulations to add Article 9, Short-Term Rentals. The Honorable Howard E. Duvall, Jr.
Thank you, City Manager. This has been a topic that we've been studying for over a year now, and I'm hoping that this afternoon we'll come up with a document that we can send to the voting city council meeting. Talking about voting, we have had a custom here of not voting at work sessions. And I pulled out section 251, 2-51 of the SC Code, which, not SC Code, the Columbia City Ordinance that talks about committee meetings and things. There's nothing in here that prevents us from voting during a work session. Today, we're going to go through some of the questions that several of us have about specific sections of the proposed ordinance. And I think the only way that we're going to ever get this up to a public session and a council meeting is to be able to decide if there is 4 people on the council now that want this provision changed or not. So I would hope that this afternoon, if we can't come to a general consensus that an item needs to be included in this ordinance or needs to be changed, that we will vote on it and see if we do have 4.
Mr. Mayor,
That,
may I?
You through, Howard?
I'm not through, but
He's not through. Let him,
I'd be glad to defer.
No, I don't want to defer it. I just want to ask TK a question. TK, let me ask you this. Traditionally, what we've done in work sessions, of course, has been a time of work. We've traditionally not voted on those matters. Rather, they've been referred to council. What I hear Howard saying is that there's no place or nothing that we can do that what we can do in work session is perhaps take a vote. Would you
The practice
clarify that
the
for me?
practice has been, even before this year, that council would not vote even in work session or subcommittees. Council recently decided to start voting in subcommittees, not a final vote of an issue, but to send a matter out of subcommittee back to council. I'm assuming that Councilman Duvall may be talking about voting the issue out of here in a certain way, but not taking a vote on the final matter.
Not taking a final vote and saying this is it, but saying this is the consensus of the work session that this needs to be included in the ordinance. The ordinance will then go to maybe the February 21st meeting for a public hearing on the fees and a first reading of the ordinance. And so certainly anybody would reserve the right to make an amendment at the full council session, but we gotta have some mechanism to be able to decide whether the majority of us think something needs to be included or not included.
What has been the disposition of the committee itself relative to STR?
The committee met several times, and we had at least 3 public hearings on it, and we have referred it back to the council. The council had a work session on it a couple of weeks ago and came up with a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 suggested changes. We went through the suggested changes and have made them in the red line version that you had right here. So there were substantial changes made after the first council work session. And what I want to do today is, I know that several of you, and the mayor sent me a list of several questions he had that need to be decided. And if there is no obvious consensus on that, I think we need to take some sort of vote to say whether it is included or not included. We can't just keep bouncing the thing around. We need to get this thing moving.
Well, can't you just request it to agenda as a council member?
No, actually not. The legal law requires that it become before council. And
In what form?
At the meeting, if you read our code of ordinance by the city, actually anything on the agenda actually has to be voted on by us, technically voted by us at a meeting before that meeting if you want to put it on an individual. And if this council doesn't vote, it doesn't go. Yeah, that's what the law says
Where does it say that?
in our code of
In
ordinance.
our code, it's how to add.
We don't practice it.
At all.
I mean, if we're pulling
It's in
out
the code,
codes,
but we
then we're
don't
going to
practice
pull
it.
them all out.
Code.
So I just want to make sure, I think.
As the one who listens to everyone making suggestions about what goes on the agenda, you all do not practice that.
No, we don't. That's why
Ever.
I'm saying, if we're gonna change, we've had an ongoing of not voting for something in this, to come out of here and say, hey, we wanna see if the majority feels comfortable moving it to the agenda, that's one thing. But I do wanna be clear that I'm not gonna participate in any vote for something in this setting. I think it should be done in the council chambers at the podium.
Well, how
Just
do
to
you-
make sure. But
how
if
do
we
you-
want to move this forward, that's different. We just want to make sure we're putting all the ground rules together. But we have actually been, I looked them up because a lot of things, everybody takes their own interpretation, and technically, we are not abiding by our laws, the way we're operating.
Well, I would like to have time to to do my referral on that, but do you suggest that we proceed, and if there is not an agreement on something?
I think what you're asking is really not a vote, but a show, therefore people comfortable moving to a council agenda is what you're asking for. You're not really asking for a vote.
I'm asking for that, but not on the whole bill, but on individual changes to the bill that some of us might not support. And if we can do that by winking or pulling on the ear or whatever, that's fine with me, but we gotta have some mechanism to be able to decide that this item needs to be changed or retained or something new. Yeah, how you gonna make that decision though if you don't vote,
Well, maybe we should start by going through it
okay?
before we,
You wanna
before
go
we get
through
into the debate about
proposed
what.
changes?
It might be helpful
Okay.
to get into the changes, because maybe more of us agree than disagree.
Dr. Bowles, good point, Dr.
You don't get to sit down.
Being more optimistic.
Attorney Knotts is flying the friendly skies.
Hey.
You're on deck.
You let them fly the friendly skies, so now you're in charge.
Okay,
Where do you want to start, Howard?
won't you let me do it?
That's what we plan on doing. Go.
We would like to hear from
All
you,
right. You've got your red line version or you got your non-red line version?
non-red line.
We have the,
I don't have a red line.
we have the
I sent you a red
January,
line version and a
What
regular
I
version.
printed didn't come out.
All right,
So we don't have the red line.
I thought we were supposed to have the January 11, 2023 version.
yeah, what we're looking at is 1.11.23 version.
Yeah,
Is that what you got?
I have a draft from 111, but I don't have a red line.
I think it'd be helpful if they could see the red line version.
Yeah.
We get copies of the red lined.
Howard has the red line.
Well, while they're doing that, why don't we talk about a couple of the things that we know? Mayor, you sent me a list of things, and we can talk about that, because it doesn't necessarily need the red line. The first thing the mayor mentioned in his reply was that a moratorium established 120 days after passage to cap the market will allow very limited time for compliance with the strict list of demands. Well, on thinking about it and talking with David Hatcher, we might need to put a buffer period in there of, say, 30 days after the ordinance is passed to allow for the implementation of the hardware and software necessary to receive the permits and then start the 120 days. So you'd add another 30 days to 120 days.
That's gotta be procured, vetted, procured, and purchased, and that's gonna happen in 30 days.
I think we can do that. You gotta probably at least 30 or 45 days before this thing's gonna get passed.
Yeah, but you have to wait for it to pass before you buy software, right?
But you can start studying, and I think we've already started studying that.
Haven't we determined we have software already that has, you just unlock another layer?
David?
We do have the current software that we're using, Intergov, where we do the current rental permits through. So we are capable of doing the STR through that same software. I think what would take some time is if you all decide we want to hire a third party to do the data collection and administer it, that may take a little more time. But for us, if we're going to do it in-house, 30 days would be enough for us to configure what we need to do to be able to start accepting applications in-house at code enforcement.
All right, Madam City Manager, if we pass this thing in April, and you have 30 plus 120, you have 150 days, do you think you can, if we're going to go for a third party, do you think that would give you enough time?
So you're asking for the third party to do it?
Well, I think that needs to be decided about how much David and his staff can already do, but I think we do need a third party to help us administer this. The third party can do a lot of things that we won't have the staff immediately to do, including monitoring where the SDRs are.
Right. We've already started discussing this in the context of a contract we already have because they have the capacity to do this potentially. But we do need to talk with legal and procurement about that. So yes, I think we can figure that out if it comes down to a third party.
Okay, so is the council comfortable with adding a buffer period of 30 days after the passage of the ordinance before we start the 120-day clock ticking for the ordinance?
And the goal of putting this moratorium in is to be able to collect accurate data?
You talking about the moratorium or the buffer period?
The moratorium. What is the
Moratorium.
purpose of us stopping?
That's, yeah.
The purpose of the moratorium is that after you get your 120 days and everybody
Registers,
is
whatever,
registered, that gives you from that date until July 1 of 2024 to collect the data, see where they are, and see if you want to continue with the moratorium. If the council does not act by July 1 of 24, then that restriction comes off and the non-owner occupied STRs are able to get. So it forces the neighborhoods and the SDR industry to work together with the council between now and 2024 to come up with either something that they can live with or then it becomes
Can you
wide
walk through
open.
the data, what's being collected? Because I don't know that I saw that spelled out.
That's a
over
bigger
here.
conversation, I
It's
think.
not.
What data do we collect to assess the effects of SDRs on local housing?
That would be up to the council.
But and a lot of that comes with, David's team,
Yeah,
the data that collected
And
on
that's
code
where the
enforcement.
third party can really help us. The
But in
third
general-
party, the mayor talked last council meeting when we discussed this about how much data he had gotten from some software. And it's out there, and it tells you where they are, how much revenue they've generated. It gives you a lot of information. So this will give you until July 1 of 2024 to use that data that is being collected to determine whether we need to move forward. Or if you don't move forward, it takes away any restriction on the non-owner occupied STRs.
And,
So you're asking for basically a 1-year moratorium.
Yes.
And Mr. Duval, I'll just renew, I think what I probably mentioned at the last meeting is that I could support a temporary moratorium that specifically says the reason for it, because I don't think we're laying that out here. Right, so that specifically says why we're doing the moratorium, which is to collect data to come up with a specific strategy or recommendation.
It specifically says that if you don't do anything before July 1 of 2024, that whole moratorium goes away and all SDRs can get permits to operate.
But it doesn't get to the crust of why we're saying we're doing it, which
You
is,
just want an explanation in the ordinance.
I'm trying to be
Just
helpful.
I'm telling y'all now, you gotta.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
even if you
yeah,
added like permit moratorium for residential districts to collect data, something to help people understand that we're just not anti-STRs altogether.
Didn't you have that text in there in previous version?
We
this-
have
I think
talked
y'all
about
need to
data
be
before.
very careful about what you're willing to put in writing, considering the atmosphere and the feedback that we've been getting from the General Assembly about this issue.
That's
Well,
why I think my
We gotta
language is good.
press on with municipal law rather than worry about what they don't wanna do in the General Assembly.
I worry about funding.
A lot of
the only
other
thing-
items
the
that.
thing
I worry
that
tremendously about a lot of funding that the city's up for in conversations and things where there's bills being pushed for possibly moving these STRs, if you put a restriction in from 6% to 4%, and a whole host of other things that I think we've got to take into consideration as we move down the road. I believe we need to get all of these registered. I truly believe that. I think we need to be collecting our fees that are owed to us. I know that there's some other legal things going on with that, but I think we need to tread lightly over a period of time to make sure that we don't alienate ourselves and get caught up in something that really affects a whole lot of other things that benefit this community. You know, because what we're talking about is less than 1% out there. That's what we're talking about here.
You're talking about 1%, but that 1% is congregated in two zip codes,
Yeah.
29201 and 29205. But anyway, this ordinance as proposed
Some of the-
is moderate. It
Most of
does-
those in
it
2.5
just
are
calls-
homeowners, not just single units.
We have
Let's
very few
clarify that.
homeowners.
Not according to the data that I've seen.
Well, that's what you got a year to look at, the data, to see what the data is. But it gives you a year to do that. And I would argue that we should not put any specific language in there. You know what you gotta do between now and 2024, and the mayor might be right, that the more language we put in there, people are gonna interpret it the way they wanna interpret it.
Mr. Mayor,
I'm interpreting what I have been told and what I have discussed with folks, and what language could be more amenable and really last. And I think that's what I'm trying to aim for, something that we can pass that will last and not be overturned by the
Which
legislation.
section is it where the language currently reads in the red line version about the 1 year? What is it
5406.
5403, 5406? This is the red line version, this is the most current version of it.
Yes.
Okay.
406 talks about, you put the moratorium on, and then by July, this provision of section 5-406 of this ordinance shall expire on July 1, 2024. So that says that you gotta get your data, you gotta make a decision whether you wanna continue to ban non-owner occupied STRs in residential zones or whatever the council feels at that time, but you gotta take an action. If you don't take an action, the moratorium comes off and they're just permitting.
But it doesn't say any
Mr.
of
Mayor,
that.
may I-
That's my concern. It doesn't say any of what you just said.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
I heard you say just a moment ago that there are quote unquote, maybe I heard it wrong, or maybe it's the right hearing. Did I hear you say that there perhaps has been some conversation with the General Assembly referencing STRs and the consequences involved? And if there are consequences, I want to say, what are they? And how do we best move that to, I think that has to be critical in terms of our conversation, referencing this.
Several representatives have put up where there's going to be
Pending legislation.
pending legislation that would be, it would penalize in different ways. I know one of them was changing it from, if you take that right away from an owner and put all restrictions on it, then it has to go to a 4%, not a 6%. There's others that then will take us out of funding pools. There's 3 or 4 different, which they're all coming together to have a conversation. I know it's moving up the ladder faster than than anybody thought. Now, I had conversations with the municipal association lobbyists and other folks about, is there any problem for us to go ahead and get things registered and start collecting fees and being able to do some things that gear us into the right direction, waiting to see what happens that doesn't conflict with what the General Assembly feels is in the short-term rental. So I think we've got a balance here. And I think we've got to get things registered. We got to know who the ownership model is. We got to know who we can contact if there's an issue. And I think we got to start heading that path. But at the same time, when you start using words of moratorium, even for a period of time, councils change and stuff, the General Assembly gets very upset with us. And at the end of the day, do we want a total restriction, or do we want to start stepping there and see how things evolve as we go? I think the first step right now is we don't have anything. So we got to get things registered, at least at the level that we do long-term. And there's a system there in the long term. You know, that we have a penal system there. I don't think anybody can argue with that, because nobody argued with that before. So there's a lot going on right now. I can't tell you that's going to happen tomorrow or Thursday or Friday, but it's coming. And you know, it's been told to us very clearly. So, but I think we got to keep trying to get some of this moved forward, because we can't continue it just to be wide open and nobody know who owns what, that we're not collecting the fees, the taxes that are owed to us, et cetera. So we've just got to find what that balance is, and I don't know what the appetite is there, but it is definitely a hot topic.
In
you
the
can
General
always-
Assembly, it would seem to me, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to make the point, we can always go back and roll back that certain provision if need be as this goes forward. But I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, we need to start the data collection process sooner rather than later.
And a part of that is, it would seem to me that this is the priority now.
That is the minimum we need to pass to do what the mayor says we need to do. That is a piece of legislation that has been molded for a year to split the baby in two, to make sure that we get the
Do
red.
what?
You not familiar with Solomon?
What do you mean split the baby
I'm
into?
familiar with Solomon. This is not a splitting the baby conversation.
Okay, well, maybe that was a wrong
Yeah, that was a
analogy
little
there.
wrong there, brother.
And we're trying to hit the sweet, how about hit the sweet spot?
Not, okay.
We want to hit the sweet
That
spot.
sweet
We want
spot.
to regulate what we can regulate. We want to go as far as we can without making the legislature mad. I can tell you from 22 years in that lobby representing municipal governments that the legislature is always trying to regulate municipal governments and county governments, and we can't be afraid of that. If we have to come back and change this, we can do it. But let's don't cower in the face of 2 or 3 legislators that want to say that you gotta do what we're talking about, or we're gonna take away your local government fund.
So what I am really resonating with is that we want more information to understand the scope of the problem. And I am very supportive of us doing whatever we need to do to explicitly make the case for, one, treating our STRs like many other businesses where they have to get a business license. All of that I think is fair. Even some of the conversations we've had about making our policies consistent with VRBO and Airbnb, supportive of that. But I think that the biggest piece, I agree with Councilwoman Herbert, that we need to be very clear that our goal is to be able to have more information and data about where these rentals are positively or adversely affecting different communities or districts within Columbia. And that's where I think we could be more explicit about that.
What if we were explicit in the whereases? Now, we have not put a section of whereases before this ordinance, which we will do before, where's my lawyer? Can we do the explanation in the whereases to make the council feel more comfortable that why we're doing this? So this is language that Councilman Herbert would suggest.
That's her whereases.
Okay, this is.
I was just trying to give it to you for consideration.
Yeah, I think that would be good language, but I'm not sure it needs to be put in the ordinance, but maybe of the whereas. But that's not a big issue. Let's don't get hung up on the explanation of the thing. Let's talk about some of the issues in the ordinance that have been brought out by the mayor and others, and see. So you're comfortable with adding the 30-day buffer before you start the 120 days. The staff is comfortable that they can administer this thing and get the proper support for it. We're putting the moratorium on after, it'll really be 150 days because you're getting a buffer and then that. So that'll give the people that are in SDRs plenty of time to get registered. And then if the council does not take the data that will be gathered by either a third party or by our own resources before July 1 of 2024, that moratorium is relieved and the non-owner occupied SDRs can get permits anywhere in the city. That's kind of where we are. Is anybody in opposition to that?
I'm not in opposition, but I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How notifying STR owners, is that something that's very simple to do? Is there like one place we go, or are we going to have to blast this several places?
Well, I think we're gonna have to do all of the above. I think we can use the platforms themselves to notify the owners that they needed to get a permit. I think that if we get a third party that notifies us that there are 750 addresses in your city that are used for STRs, so we can send them notices. But I bet you by the time 150 days rolls around, everybody that's got an STR or is thinking about an STR will know they need a permit to operate.
I just want to make sure, because I just want to make sure that we're allowing time to make sure we get the word out to everybody.
We will be proactive in making sure everybody that's in this business knows that there's a new sheriff in town.
Did we, quick question, Howard.
Go ahead.
Business license required, where did we land on owner occupied?
We're supposed to land, and the attorneys suggested that we gotta make it so it's both of them. I hope we landed
So
there.
you're
on
saying
that.
it's uniform for owner occupied and,
Just to remind y'all, we're in active litigation against Airbnb, and our main cause is for business license fees, accommodation fees and business license, because they're not remitting now as they should be.
They're collecting it from the owners, but they're not paying us.
Say that too loud.
That's true. I mean, that's what we're alleging on our side.
So, Councilman Brennan, are you talking about on page 5, if we're going to permit fees or just business license fee?
B, business license.
When did you see
Shouldn't
that?
owner occupied and non-owner occupied all have the same rules?
That's
Yes.
kind of where I was.
That's what TK is saying.
Yeah. So you'd have to change 406A as well. Can't just say non-owner occupied, it has to say all.
No, if it's an owner-occupied house, I think they have the right to rent their house out under state law. The state law allows them 72 days a year without losing their 4% tax classification. So I think we can say if it's an investor-owned, if it's a non-owner occupied, that's where the moratorium counts.
So all the problems created by a homeowner not be counted in a moratorium, so we could
No,
have
that-
500 more in that neighborhood, right? I mean, that's what you're saying, is it's okay to have that, because 72 days rental for somebody on that, I mean, to me, if you're gonna put a moratorium to collect data, you gotta have it all. You can't just have one side of the story.
What's the feeling of the council? You want to make everybody,
You want the true data, you want the true code enforcement, CPD calls and stuff.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
what you're asking for, to make a decision based on it, if it goes in a residential area, but if the residents are the ones that are having the issues, but they're not having to follow the same rules.
they're
don't
following the
make it.
same rules as far as inspections and as far as,
Well, according to this, there can be more of them than of any other category, and there's nothing we can say or do about it.
there's nothing, they're not more of them, they're more of the investor-owned. But I'm perfectly willing to make the moratorium apply to everybody until July 1 of 24. Is that the consensus of council? Shake your heads or hold your ears or something?
I can agree to
I
that.
got yours.
And then I would go back to the permit fees because we're charging owner occupied 100 and non-owner occupied 250.
And those are generally accepted permit for the cities that we have surveyed. At $250 is half the initial price that we put on STRs. And we need that money to be able to operate this system.
I don't disagree with
Can we not make
the,
them the same number?
yeah, I guess my question is, how would you enforce if it was owner occupied or not owner occupied?
They would have,
Tax, or 6%, 4%.
yeah, it's the 6% and the 4%. The owner occupied are gonna be in a 4% house, and there'd be one house,
And this is a consistent practice in other,
yeah.
to have two different business license rates?
Yes, I think it's an entirely different thing if an owner wants to rent out their house for 72 days according to the state law. All right, while we on fees, are we settled?
I have been persuaded.
Okay, thank you. All right, the mayor had on his thing a $1 million general liability policy should not be a requirement. I'm willing to give on that.
Isn't that a requirement of Airbnb?
The Airbnbs do it themselves.
But we don't make long-term rentals do that. I'm just trying to
So
let,
what I mean is it's being covered anyway. It's a requirement for whatever third-party platform they're using.
Yeah, and Airbnb actually provides their host with the $1 million of coverage.
Great.
Are y'all taking that whole section out or changing the amount? Just taking that whole section out?
We're taking the requirement for liability insurance out.
What number is that, someone?
that'd be 402D.
So we striking the whole thing or just striking the limit that we're requiring?
Now, do we have these inspections with the long-term rental?
Yes. David has the authority to inspect. Take D out.
It is, we did set it up similar to how we do the long-term ones. They have to provide us a checklist that they're certifying everything meets minimum code, or they can ask us to do inspections, or in this case, we'll, if it's a problem property, we'll require an inspection if we know there are going to be problems there.
So this brings up a good question and overall. So when somebody provides us that at their renewal, future short-term or whatever, but yet we find out that they've lied, what happens?
I mean, we start a case and we enforce it. They get points charged against their permit. Technically, you know, we could revoke if we need to based on that.
We need to have a deeper discussion about that, especially on the long term. Because the laundry list of pictures and complaints that I'm getting, and these folks are getting rental permits, somehow we've got to figure out either a different way that we can fund more inspectors or have a way to go see. But some of the pictures that have been shared with me of the conditions that residents are living in, it's just unacceptable to me. And I'm not trying to put pressure on you. I'm trying to understand what leverage do we have? And I think our leverage is we've got to figure out how to be able to get in there and find out. And much like we did with the business license, we're going to trust you. But if we find out you're lying, we're going to fine you pretty heavily. So I think we've got to think about how we handle this
I think
in the future.
a better public reporting portal would help too, you know?
It's got to be something.
Yeah.
I mean, I know for some people, short-term rentals is an issue. Data so far doesn't show that, but for some people it is. Long-term rentals in Columbia is a huge issue. And we've got people beating the system, using tax shelters to hide and do this. And I'm using this moment to bitch about it because I'm gonna be honest with you, the way some of these people are living in our community is not acceptable. And we're spending a lot of time on something like this when we ought to be figuring out how to take care of that issue. That's just my soapbox for the day.
This will allow us to get more code enforcement officers that can help with that problem as well as the short term. Okay. The other thing that the mayor had on his list was the parking requirements would mean that some residents have to build additional parking to comply. How would the city enforce this, et cetera? What's in the ordinance now says 1 parking space for every 2 bedrooms in a dwelling unit must be made available and designated for an STR. Guests must be notified of the parking plan and the maximum number of vehicles allowed, which shall not exceed 6 between sunset and sunrise.
So what do we do on a public street?
Well, before we get to the public streets, let's look at the private properties. The city of Columbia requires 2 parking spaces per residential house, and you can't use but 40% of your front yard in order to park vehicles. This is essentially the same requirement we're having here.
No, because I can name a house on Watery that's got 5 bedrooms and only has 2 parking spots.
That's 10, you got 10 people in that house?
I don't know how many people stay there. I don't stay there.
But now that is different, Howard. The normal code says, I guess, the most that it's requiring that you have is 2. But under mayor's example, then they would be required to have 10 parking spaces. Is that
Well,
the
if he-
intent?
On his thing, if he had 10 bedrooms,
I said 5 bedrooms. Sorry.
5 bedrooms, that would be 10
I
people.
don't know many 10 bedrooms in Columbia. but
Might be.
There might be 1 or 2.
And this is based on,
That'd be a boarding house though, wouldn't it?
this is based on every 2 bedrooms, so 10.
1 parking space for every 2 bedrooms, so if it was that 5-bedroom house, how many is that?
2.5?
2,
2.5 parking spaces?
2.5 parking
But
spaces.
you're limited to, depending on the lot size, and so in an Elmwood Park neighborhood or other folks, they couldn't achieve that. They don't have, and so those folks are allowed to park in the street because it's a public street, so so does that count if you're in that situation? I'm just trying to understand how we're gonna enforce it when you can't enforce it equally across the system.
How would you word it? what
I
kind of-
don't know. I'm not a parking expert. That's why we have a parking division, but I'm just trying to sit here to think about what restrictions or how do you work that out if there's public road? Let's say the residents live in that neighborhood and they use the street for their extra cars and whatever else. Why wouldn't this person be able to use that same parking as well?
Well, Mr. Mayor, to your point, an unintended consequences, which we are seeing now is.
But this is part of
is
your
property-
permitting
Property owners
processes.
taking half of their front yard and throwing down gravel and calling it a parking lot. I do not want to see that as a trend as we move forward. So let's keep that in mind when we're coming up with these parking paths.
And I'm asking that because it's one of those things that's involved in the permitting process. So if you can't actually get permitted because you're in this, how do you deal with that? Because they're in the system, or they will be in the system now, so they're in the beginning, so they're not anew, so that's a little different. How do you anticipate dealing with that?
Let's think of some language that would maybe satisfy the majority. What about if we said that you have to have a minimum of 2 car spots per unit?
Per unit? So you're
Per
dwelling?
STR, or dwelling.
That's
what we do for residential.
I just don't know if I would want to keep the max 6 language because of some of the concerns that we talked about last time as well. It's very hard to enforce if if I'm owner
We talked
occupied.
about that
We would just,
it was the overnight that we were concerned about. So the military was an example. Military family, the kid only gets 2 hours out, family comes in, they have a cookout, there's 20 people there, but they're not all spent. I thought we had come up with something or talked about something around overnight was the issue.
Yeah, we used the language between sunset and sunrise.
That would have been helpful if I had this version.
I sent it to you twice.
Only one that kept coming out was, and I don't know what the 2 cats is beside it, but,
Those are 2 cars, not cats.
it's like cats.
2 cars.
You only can have 2 cats at the SDR.
All right. Mayor, would you be willing to accept 2 cars per dwelling,
2 parking spaces.
2 parking spaces?
I mean, that's what we require for someone to build, correct?
Right.
I mean, that's
All right.
International Business Code.
So, 2 cars.
Off-street or street spaces count? We need clarity on
Don't get technical, Missy.
that. You gotta know.
On property is what we require for residential. 2 car spaces on the dwelling.
We require that for all residential?
I was not aware of that, but.
All new
For new
residential.
residential.
We
I
do
think
not.
there's- yeah.
We do not require that. But existing,
Oh, we got the parking expert back in. Off-street. It'd be on the,
I don't want front yard getting paved, so be careful where we go here.
I mean, we don't require it, so how do we require it? I mean, if they build a house and it's not required, then
it is required on new construction.
yeah, but most of what we're talking about is already built. Correct?
What are the
That would be
Airbnb
another
regulations?
reason why you couldn't get a permit.
I don't know that Airbnb rate.
Airbnb has their own regulations when it comes to parking, don't they? Or does it break down to
I don't know.
per owner?
I've stayed in one,
Did they tell you where to park?
yeah, but it had a garage. It was
Can we
nice.
circle that and move forward?
Okay.
They had a washer and dryer. Gas stove.
I heard of one that has a pickleball court in the backyard, Howard.
Okay, there's one thing in section 408. I talked to David about this. And it's, in B, 408B. I think you gotta turn the page. It's, the way it reads now, it says.
Talking about section C, subsection B?
Yes. Second offense of each and each offense thereafter. 5 points will be assessed for a second occurrence, and each occurrence thereafter of the same citation, violation, or offense within the last 12 months. That's not what we need to say in both the long term or the short term, and David says they've not been enforcing it this way. So it can be a different offense. They could be targeted once for parking in the front yard and targeted the next time for another violation, and that's the
Not
second.
targeted, we wouldn't be targeting them.
Well,
I have a feeling.
okay, we're not targeting. All right,
Just
David.
that resident reporting portal, is a good thing.
David explained the language that we need. I'm thinking we take out,
The intent of the ordinance is that if they have an offense, no matter what it is, they're violating any city ordinance, that's first offense. The next time we go out there for another violation of whatever city ordinance, and it's not necessarily the same thing, that's second offense. I think that was the intent behind it. The way it's worded doesn't necessarily reflect that, I think is what Councilman Duvall was
correct
saying.
that word.
So-
wording.
Just so I understand, because one of the concerns I have with our long-term rental is that we find the owner, if there's an incident, even if we didn't fine or ticket the person who had, and I'm gonna give a party as an example. All right, and so they have a party, the police come, they don't ticket anybody. The owner gets notified 4 months later that he has points. What I want to understand is if you got somebody breaking our noise ordinance or whatever, that person should get a ticket. I mean, it should not be allowed. If the property has never had anything, then we ought to have some warning instead of going from 5 to 10 or whatever it is in the beginning, right off the bat, because if we don't notify them and we wait 4 months to notify them, how do we solve the problem? Because that's not, I mean, there's nothing the landlord can do then.
I don't think the 4 months is typical. I mean, does it happen? It could, but I don't think it's typical. And it's at the discretion of the police officer when he's on site, if there's any chargeable tickets he can write, or she, and I think that they do when they can. So I can assure you, though, whenever we deal with other issues that are not parties, grass and debris and care of permits type things, we do notice the tenant and the owner, and we do write summonses to the tenants often for things like that. So we do hold both accountable whenever we can.
So
The
that
parties
would-
is probably
that
the
would-
only exception to the rule, and that's just something we probably need to change our procedures internally
Policy.
on, our policy. Yes, sir.
Because, I mean, you know, the system itself, I mean, you get tagged quickly in this thing. If an owner of a unit says you're a bad tenant, you can't rent. I mean, it happens pretty quickly in this vacation rental world.
I mean, we've seldomly have revoked anybody's permits for this. So generally what happens if you have a couple offenses, then the landlord takes action. And if they evict those tenants and the points are based on those tenants, then they have an opportunity to have those points reversed. So we have systems in place to give landlords opportunities to address problem tenants before it becomes a problem.
So some Airbnb leaves their trash can out. Is that a first offense or is that a warning?
It's first offense if we,
Revoke
yeah.
it.
I would suggest that we.
So I'm trying to levelize the playing field here because we're creating an atmosphere to target individuals. So what happens, do you cite a homeowner the same way the first time?
And actually, let me backtrack a little bit. When you say roll cart, the roll cart specifically, we have a way we handle that internally. We actually don't charge a point until the third time we've taken the roll cart. So that one's the exception, but for front yard parking, first time we go there and see it, it's first offense.
First
Or
offense.
overgrown grass is first offense. But the roll cart's probably the only thing that we do give everybody 3 warnings on, because we have the little green stickers. The third time we put that sticker on there, we just throw your trash can in the back of the truck and you have to pay solid waste to get it back. And we assess the point at that point.
Just, which reminds me, thank you for that, David. Just remind me, how, do we have anything in here on the parking around handicap? So what? probably need to think about.
You mean for handicapped people or in handicapped spots?
Let's say somebody has an ADA accessible house that they rent, which is apparently in need. Some of the military families that I've talked to have talked about that. And, you know, do we allow them to have a temporary setup in the front yard if that's the case? You know, because we don't really have it built up. Yeah, that's what I'm just asking questions I know that have popped up from folks. Just
We do not
curious.
currently.
Currently, okay. Something we need to think about.
I would suggest that on that, we say the second offense and each offense thereafter. 5 points will be assessed for a second occurrence and each occurrence thereafter within the last 12 months.
No matter what the offense is.
Whatever the offense is. Do you want to wink or blink or nod your head? I accept that as an affirmative answer. Okay. Those are the list of questions that I had. Do you want to go through the ordinance again? Or do you have any particular questions? The only question we haven't solved, according to the list of questions that I had, is parking.
We require the same safety of the homeowner, correct? Homeowner that rents his house is under the same.
Right, same thing.
If I may give everyone a quick example for our current residential permitted neighborhoods. If you are a homeowner resident, you may receive 2 homeowner permits and 3 visitor permits. If you're the homeowner non-resident, you only get 1 visitor permit, i.e. then the tenant would be permitted and they may have 2. Slightly varies dependent on the residential area, but that will give you an example that we may be challenged moving forward about the visitor permits because they're not assigned to a specific license plate versus a block. So if I'm visiting at your home at a specific location and you're a residentially permitted area, you would give me a visitor permit. It's not tied to my license plate. When I'm done visiting, I would return it to you and you could use it with the next guest.
So that means 5 cars could be on the street in that scenario,
Or owner occupied.
or owner occupied.
Yes. So something we may want to consider is that non-resident homeowner who wants to lease their home, they would only be entitled to 1 visitor permit. So how would we account for their parking, you know, if it's that military family, you they're only going to get one visitor.
That would be only if it was in a residential neighborhood that has the parking. If it isn't,
Currently
then
permitted,
it's public
yes.
parking, yeah. So, I mean, there's only, what, 4 neighborhoods that have that?
You want to leave the parking out?
Well, I mean, you have to have some parameters of it, but I don't know that you're gonna solve that right now because there's too many differences in different parts of town.
Well, we got one ordinance. We need to put something in here or else be
I
silent.
mean, I just
on
don't know
it.
how
Let
you
me
tell
free-for-all.
somebody they can't use a public street to park if other people can use the public street. I mean, it's a public road. So,
For the non-residential
Right.
neighborhoods, that's correct, but if you're a residentially permitted neighborhood, these are the parameters for most of the neighborhoods. And I think we were just speaking how we would move forward if you are one of those short-term rentals and you excessively abuse parking, how we would communicate with one another. And someone potentially could be penalized on how they communicate to that individual leasing, short-term lease, the parking regulations.
How many permitted neighborhoods are there that we're talking about?
I think it's 4.
4?
But I mean, how do you patrol, I mean, if a homeowner who has a driveway decides to put all 5 of his cars in the street,
That's fine. Oh, in the street, no.
I mean, you're not regulating that either. So how do you give that house only 1 visitors,
Point taken.
you know?
This was established prior to my arrival.
Well, it was
You know,
before anybody
to
was doing
audit,
this.
right, to audit those off-street properties that have parking versus the properties that have no parking available, there would be a difference. We've not audited that in a number of years. That's a large undertaking to walk each block. But we in parking would treat 2 individuals no differently, knowing that you have a driveway or a garage and could park your vehicles there versus someone 2 doors down with no off-street parking. You're eligible for the same permits.
I don't think we're gonna solve that in the next 10 minutes, so why don't we agree to send this up to the full council 4 o'clock session and have a public hearing on the fees and potentially first reading on the ordinance. And we will bring to you, maybe the mayor could help us with some mention of parking that we can put in here.
I'm still, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I'm struggling with this whole moratorium and how it would work. And to me, it seems like a backdoor way to cap, because I just don't see the path here. The language does not, we got to noodle on this and, you know, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not interested in next Tuesday is not gonna be possible because Dr. Bustles is not gonna be here for that meeting. That's correct, right? You are? Oh, you're not going now?
I'm going, but it'll be over by 4.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were out of town. So I know we were shifting stuff around. I got some angst with the General Assembly, I really do.
Well, we can't shirk our duty because the General Assembly is thinking about doing something.
Well, we can also start the process by requiring registration and everything. I'm not here yet, and I need to spend some time with, well, I wish James was still here because I know he was working on it with TK and others around this moratorium.
Who was working on it?
James,
James is no longer with us.
didn't I just say that?
What did,
I just said that. I just said James is no longer. Wish he was here.
yeah, he was here, yeah.
Because he'd been working on it.
I would like to get the council to move it up to the next available council meeting for the public hearing on the fees that are included. Are there 4 of you that want to do that?
Yeah, I would.
Well, I think either way we have to, what I'm saying is it needs to be voted on. So I'm not giving you my preference, my decision at the moment until I see the final and make sure it has what I have.
But are you okay with moving it up to the?
Generality we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah,
Well, I'm more in favor of sort of moving it up.
good.
And when I say moving it up, not looking at the 21st. That's what I hear you saying.
No, I'm saying let's move this to the 4 o'clock council session so we can have a public hearing on the fees and possibly give it a first reading.
And other items.
Yeah, and clarify some of these items that we'll get a clean copy back out to you.
I'm not ready. I'm not ready to do that yet.
Oddity?
So the legislative stuff is a little bit new to me, and going to the legislative briefing at MASC, it's clear that there's going to be some friction, and I do fear the funding piece. And I'd prefer that we would be at a place where this could be passed in a way that is very focused on us wanting to have fair policies for short-term and long-term rentals, and our desire to collect accurate data. And as it's currently written, I think we need a little bit more time, but
So it looks like
Yeah.
it's 3 to 3.
I will say it is important to make sure that we have the next draft well enough ahead of time.
We can draft this thing till
so
cows come home.
my question is, Councilman Duval, could we do a public hearing and not do the first reading?
Yeah, we can do that.
I'd love to get some public input, but because I still have some questions that we talked about additional language, and I do think there have been a lot of other reasons why we have been strategic in our policymaking because of the state legislature. So we can't just say that, oh, let's ignore that, right? Because there's so many great projects that we are asking for funding for, including even the Assembly Street project that we learned about today, where there's $13 million pending. And in the grand scheme of things, I think we have to keep that in mind, because that's very much been a key priority for us as, placemaking and beautification. And so,
I think we all agree that we want to get registered, we want to have agents.
Correct.
We want to have a way to collect
To
the
track and-
data. I mean, I think that's the biggest pieces, because at the end of the day, I think we're all in agreement how we get there. I don't think we're all there yet, but having a public hearing and then from there,
I think I would be in favor of us getting public input if you'd like. And then going
Okay,
from
can we
there.
have a public hearing and call that the public hearing on the fees?
Just a public hearing.
We have to have a draft or an ordinance attached to it. I mean, so we have to have something to present, to put on the agenda to have the public hearing on. So do you want these changes you talked about today to be drafted up, and that's the draft that's going out next week, or? We can't just put the fees up there. We have to have it in the ordinance, so.
So TK, we cannot, I'm sorry.
Do we need 15 days, Erica? Use 15 days notice to do the public hearing for the fees.
It's already within the.
can't.
What's
Yeah.
the next meeting, Tuesday?
So the next,
She said you can't because you gotta have 15 days notice.
so that will not be until the end of the month then?
So with the fees, it's required for the 15 days,
Right.
right?
Yeah, for fees, but if I'm hearing you want other feedback on some of the other things you've talked about today, is that correct?
Correct, that, for me, yes.
For this issue, I don't think two is, I think that's probably about right, to be honest, for this issue, but,
So let's be clear, we talking about fees, 15 days, Erica? TK, we can do that, have a public hearing,
That'd be the second,
just list.
What's this, March?
No, we should have an ordinance, a draft ordinance, but you have to give the public 15 days notice that we're gonna talk about raising fees. So that will be sometime around the end of March or,
So it's already.
When's our next work session?
Yeah, the 28th, 1 to 5.
There's this public hearing already scheduled for.
Well, we're hoping that goes away. But I mean, just, right.
yeah.
There's a lot of stuff on your agendas I really need to get in front of you on budgetary items, but if you're wanting to wait and incorporate the fees in this version of it, then certainly you've got more, you're gonna have more than enough time if you push it to the first meeting in March. But if you,
I don't
I
want to
thought
have
you
two
were
public
trying.
hearings. If we're gonna have a
It
public
doesn't
hearing,
matter
let's
to
do
me what you
whatever
all
we have to do
do.
to
I
wait till
just
the
feel
15th.
like there's a lot of other questions outside of the fees discussion, it sounds like. But if you want to wait, I mean, we're just giving you options. It doesn't make any difference, however y'all want to do it.
Tina, you gonna share the language with everybody you suggested?
I gave it to Councilman Duval, and he is giving it back to me. I just said something similar to temporary moratorium to allow city and council that we're creating to establish registration system, gather data to determine the impact of STRs on housing stock, neighborhoods, etc. City council shall make a final recommendation or changes to such ordinance no later than July 1, 2024.
My critique of that particular one is that you're saying that the council has got to act before July 1 of '24, and the way it's set up now, the moratorium automatically comes off unless the council acts.
I got what you're saying.
Okay.
I see the difference.
All right, we'll clean it up. Get it as close to what I think that the majority of opinion is here, and get it back to you to read before you come to the next meeting. And maybe the first meeting in March, we can have the public hearing.
March the 7th?
Did you mention there's another public hearing that day?
We,
Okay.
Would that give us time to advertise?
Can we advertise without the ordinance?
can't,
We just have to have the ordinance for the agenda?
Erica, how do you typically advertise it for the 15 days? Do you just put it out or do you post it in a? Yeah.
So you have to publish the whole ordinance in the paper?
Absolutely. Whenever you raise fees. So Erica, how much before the 15 days would you have to have it ready to get it posted? So that's 20 days before. So
Can y'all work on a timeline and kind of let us know? Or do we need to figure it out right now?
looks like it'll be the end of March.
I mean, we can work on the timeline. I don't hear consensus on the language. So are you all gonna get that done in time for us to do all this?
There's no mechanism to do that. We don't have another meeting that we can sit around the table and do it again. You're just putting this thing off, and the neighborhoods are suffering for it.
So, that's fine. I think you also have to make sure that once you put it out there, the community will not, your community response will have been such that everyone understands what you're doing. So I'm just cautioning for things like this in the past, and the first time people see it in the newspaper, like an advertisement, and you haven't sat and discussed it enough, what you're trying to do, you may not end up accomplishing it anyway. So I was just suggesting, even if we put it on, not that we have a whole lot of extra space and time at any of our upcoming meetings, the 21st, the 28th, did you want to talk about it again so that whatever is advertised, which I'm not sure, it'd have to probably be the 21st, if you're trying to accomplish
When is our,
solidifying things before we advertise it.
when is the next opportunity that the council can have a work session on this particular topic?
Well, you know, Mr. Vaughn, we just meet when y'all ask us to meet. So if y'all want to come up with a day that's outside of your normal meeting times, that's fine too. You meet again on February 21st.
That's a 4 o'clock meeting.
I would like to add too, from the public hearing perspective, the committee, the ad hoc committee has had several sessions, and I don't know, and I could be totally wrong. I mean, I think that we've heard from the core people who are really interested in the issue. More people may become, I don't know if they'll come out, but I will say we've had, so did we have three? Yeah. Yeah, we've had a lot of public input.
Okay.
And I think that it may be, we kind of see the same group of folks. Is that?
Repeatedly.
Okay. Well, whatever. You all let us know what you want to do.
All right.
So if you tried to go to a March 1st public hearing, March 7th, 20 days, so that you'd have to have a final draft, okay, so final draft that can be advertised. After that public hearing or that reading, you could make adjustments if necessary, correct? When would you need the language?
20 days.
It'd have to be in the paper by Friday, realistically, because Monday's a holiday. And the paper, yeah, because Monday's a holiday. President's Day. We already know that the paper that gets delivered here is a couple days behind.
3 days behind the ball game.
So would it be smarter, when's the next opportunity would be what date? Be better to just make that the date for the public hearing and the first reading and get it done, get all this work finished up and then packaged so it can be sent out to the public?
And then have a future public hearing on the fees that are in it?
No, do it all, do the whole shebang.
Because that way the
In
15
one-
days would
in
be
one
covered.
thing. Fee structure, the ordinance, everything.
That suits me.
That way, it gives staff time to incorporate all the things we talked about today, clarifying some of the parking issues, moratorium, make sure the language is
Software, too.
correct, the software, all of that. Then that gives them the ability to post it, and that gives them plenty of time to get it in the paper. And we get to have the public hearing and the first reading on that date, instead of trying to do two and rush and something have to be switched and.
That's a good idea. I move that we do that.
March 21st.
Does that make sense?
Whatever you all want to do, we'll make it happen. March the 21st. Is that right? Okay.
Tina, you need to share your language with TK, and we need to go
TK.
through it. And then L and whoever else, we need to figure out what the parameters around the parking is and how you put something that can be universally enforced. Yeah, I don't know the answer to it. I hate not to have something in there, and maybe it's, depending on where it is, maybe there's some whereases and there is.
Parking must comply with all local rules. Thank y'all for your input this afternoon, and I think we have moved the ball a little bit, and we'll get this thing going. Happy Valentine's, everybody.
Motion to adjourn.